Great to be back again for our friend Don Yitzhak Abravanel on the Parsha for 30 minutes on the Parsha. Tonight we're doing Parsha's Matos-Masei, and the first comment that I want to begin with relates to the opening passage. And if you're with me in the Art School Chumash, you can find on page 900 or whatever Chumash you may be using. It's Parsha's Matos, and it is chapter 30 in the book of Bamidbar. The name Matos doesn't come from Matos like an airplane. It comes from the plural of Mateh, Mateh meaning a tribe yeah, we say tribe. Vaydaber Moshe el Roshei Hamatos livnei Yisrael limor. Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes of the children of Israel, and he said, Zeh hadavar asher tziva Adonai. This is what God has commanded. And what follows is an extended treatment of the subject of Nidarim. A neder is a vow or an oath. We have Nidarim, we have Shvuos, and the Torah describes in, let's say, more detail or more at greater length than we might find in many other passages. Abarbanel takes up the question, why is this extended passage featured in the Torah at this point? For the most part, the mitzvahs of the Torah were given to Moshe on Har Sinai. Perhaps all of them were given on Har Sinai, and Moshe conveyed many of them in quick succession. So, for example, the portion of Mishpatim, the portions of Truma and Titzaveh, these have many, many mitzvahs, and they were all conveyed shortly after Matan Torah. We have the portion of Kedoshim in the book of Vayikra. So that was in Ohel Moed, which was constructed within the year of the giving of the Torah. However, this passage is 39 years later. This is at the end of the extended process of wandering in the wilderness. This is at the end of the life of Moshe. In particular, says Abarbanel, this is after Moshe has already been told in last week's Sedra, ascend this mountain, and that's where you're going to die. And that's why Moshe said immediately to Hashem, designate a successor so the children of Israel will not be like a flock without a shepherd. So the game is up for Moshe. He's already been informed that his death is at hand. This was 39 years later. Why did Moshe wait until now to tell them about the phenomenon of Nidorim? So Abravanel says, actually, it's very logical. He points out, and I don't have time to dwell on this, but he explains in last week's Sedra that the whole last section of the Sedra, which is an extended passage about the offerings, the karbonos that were brought on Shabbos, firstly the daily offering, then the Shabbos offering, then the Rosh Chodesh offering, then the offerings for all the Moadim, including Rosh Hashanah, including Yom Kippur, all of those offerings, including every day of Sukkot when there was a different offering, including Shmini Atzeres. That's an extended chapter which describes in specificity which offering on which day, on which occasion. What does that have to do with the context of the portion of Pinchas? Again, Abravanel says we would have expected that to appear in Vayikra, or maybe even in Shmos. Why does the Torah wait until here? So his approach is that because Moshe was told that he's going to die, so as long as Moshe was alive, Moshe himself was the conduit for prophecy, such as never existed before or since. Moshe is the greatest of the prophets. Says Abravanel, by the same token, Moshe also, his greatness and his closest to God, Moshe's role as the conduit for divine communication to mankind meant that as long as Moshe was alive, the possibility of prophecy was much more readily accessible, was much more achievable. The idea of divine revelation in Moshe's lifetime was an experience to which the Jewish people had become accustomed. But after Moshe's death, then we have the need for the karbonos to accomplish that. So I don't have time to dwell on that more extensively, but that's what Abravanel says in last week's Parsha. So according to that way of thinking, Abravanel says the same is true here as well. Namely, that in last week's Parsha, we learned that Moshe's death is at hand, as a result of which we have the extended karbonos for the reason I just explained. He says, in a similar way, or as long as Moshe was the leader of the Jewish people, as long as Moshe was the lawgiver and the redeemer and the prophet and the sage and the mentor for the Jewish people, the one who taught them Torah in a way that no one ever taught before or since, during all of that time, if someone made a vow and he wants to be absolved of the vow, of course he goes to Moshe. Moshe is the quintessential mumche l'rabim. Mumche l'rabim means someone who is expert, and his expertise is acknowledged by the whole community. Such a person has the authority, has the expertise to annul a vow. Such an individual is a person to whom someone who takes a vow and later regrets it can approach the mumche l'rabim, and he can seek absolution of the vow. So Moshe was the one who did it for all of Klal Yisrael. Now you might say, practically, how could one man have time to absolve the vows of a whole nation? But it could be that the vows were few. People didn't take vows in a rash manner or in an irresponsible manner. It could be that those who took vows, for the most part, they upheld them and they didn't change their mind after a week or after a year and say, actually, I wish I hadn't done that. So it could be that the occasions for the need for absolution of a vow were not that many. And when the circumstance arose, they went to Moshe, and Moshe did it for them. Now that Moshe is going to die, so Moshe realizes the need to tell the people that it's not only the great leader of the generation or someone as the greatest prophet who has not just a proficiency, but to whom the Torah empowers to absolve someone of a vow, but rather it is applicable to Roshei Matos, to the elders, to the senior personality, to the Torah educators, and that sort of thing. So that's how Abarbanel says that Moshe spoke to Roshei Matos. Firstly, they were his successors. That is to say, the heads of the tribes, and it doesn't mean only one head of each tribe, but it means collectively the leaders of each tribe were the ones who would, after the death of Moshe, for all future generations, it would fall to them to potentially absolve someone from a vow. That's called Heter Nidarim. Moreover, so Moshe had to explain to them, so to speak, how it works, etc. It could also be, although Abarbanel doesn't spell this out, but I think this is what he means as well, that Moshe also needed to publicize it. It could be that the cognoscenti, those who were well informed, even in the 39 years of Moshe's leadership, were also aware that they had the authority to absolve a vow. Perhaps Moshe even, again, Abarbanel doesn't say this, but maybe Moshe even sort of demonstrated or taught some of them how to do it, and he may have modeled the technique, etc. But the people collectively were not aware. And here maybe Abarbanel is hinting to what Ramban says. He doesn't quote Ramban, hinting to what Ramban says, that actually it's maybe not such a great idea to publicize widely the fact that if a person takes a vow, there's a method of absolution as well. Because if a person thinks or knows that I can always evade or I can always cancel a vow, he'll be too quick to take a vow. He might take a vow that he has no intention really to uphold. He might take a vow and forget to annul the vow and just ignore the vow, and therefore he will be guilty of transgressing. So Ramban says it's El Roshei Matos because actually there's a reason not to publicize the Heter Nidarim so widely. But nevertheless, it could also be that now that Moshe is dying, now that the Roshei Matos have responsibility and have the empowerment to be the ones to absolve one from responsibility for a vow under certain circumstances. So now Moshe also needs to tell the people about it. So even though it's addressed to Roshei Matos, but it could be that Moshe, again, saw the need to convey to the people the fact that someone who has taken a vow and is unable or unwilling to uphold that vow, there is a mechanism by which he can be released from from that obligation. So that's how Abarbanel explains the whole first chapter of this Sedra. I want to now proceed with not the immediate following chapter, but the one that follows that. And that is chapter 32, according to the conventional designation, even though you possibly recall that we mentioned that the division into chapters is not of Jewish origin. Probably was the work of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Stephen Langton, in the I think 12th century. Excuse me. So actually, we don't really regard the chapter designations as definitive in our tradition. Nevertheless, for convenience, it is very useful to draw on them. So if you turn to page 910 in the article or chapter 32 in whatever Chumash you may be using. So now we have another extended passage. Again, fairly well known. We have to wonder why the Torah writes about it at such length. And again, I want to share with you a very interesting perspective of Abarbanel. I'm talking about the Parsha of the children, that is to say, the tribes of Gad, the tribes of Reuven and Gad. Actually, the Torah sometimes says Reuven and Gad, and sometimes says the other way, Gad and Reuven, with regard to this petition. What was their petition? So let's take it from the beginning. Umikne Rav haya livnei Reuven v'livnei Gad atzum ma'od. A great deal of livestock. The children of Reuven, the children of Gad, had abundant livestock, very great. Atzum ma'od. And they looked around and they saw the cities that had been conquered recently, Eretz Gilad, and they realized this is great pasture land. So they approached. So it says Vayavo b'nei Gad v'nei Reuven. Interestingly, immediately in the next pasuk, the order of the two tribes is immediately reversed. So Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven approached and Moshe, and they said to him and to Elazar the Kohen, you know, all of these places, these lands that we've recently conquered, the land that God has conquered, Eretz Mikneh, it's great pasture land. You know, we've got a lot of pasture. So Abraham asked a very good question. You know, I often say that the questions, whether Abarbanel or other great Meforshim ask, once I contemplate the question, I wonder, I marvel at the fact that it never occurred to me. The question he asks is, why is this passage here in this particular location? Why does the Torah describe their petition at this late stage? And the context of the question is, meaning the reason that question is a compelling question, is that the land that they're looking around, that they're contemplating, this is the land of Sichon and Og. This is the land, these are the lands on Transjordan, the east bank of the Jordan, which the Jewish people had conquered in terms of the sequence of the Torah at the end of Parshas Chukas. But that was some time ago. That was Pinchas we did last week. Balak we did the week before. Chukas we did the week before that, even though in the diaspora we did two of them together. I'm just saying there's a lot of text in the Torah, and Abarbanel does not accept the formula that Mukdam Muchar, the Torah is written in an order that is not necessarily chronological. He's very reluctant to accept that, and he, with great ingenuity, generally explains how the Torah is written according to the correct sequence, according to the chronological sequence. And if that is the case, then he asks, once the Jewish people conquered the lands of Sichon and Og, that is the point at which Gad and Reuven would naturally have said, we've conquered this land, this is a great pasture land, we'd like to stay here. Why does that petition, why is it addressed only later on? He answers in a very simple way. How did they get all of this livestock anyway? Now, of course, it could be they took some from Egypt. 40 years have passed. So if you're skillful and maybe with some good fortune, the size of your herd and your flock can increase substantially during that period of time. Okay, fair enough. But he says the following: the Jewish people had indeed come into a lot of livestock, not because of the battle with Sichon and Og, but because of the battle with Midian. And that is that's the chapter that we've skipped over tonight, meaning we're not giving it our direct attention. But the war against Midian, and the Torah describes, again with a lot of detail, the booty and the livestock and the animals that were captured, and how it was divided up between those who went to battle and those who stayed behind. According to Abarbanel, that's why they had so much livestock. He acknowledges it could be that others also had that much livestock. It could well be that their livestock was not dramatically more numerous than that of the other tribes. But It could be that they appreciated it more. Could be in the negative sense that they were more fixated on their wealth. They were more possessive. They were more conscious of their wealth. Maybe the rest of the Jewish people were more interested in spiritual wealth, or maybe other types of wealth as well. You know, you've got gold and silver, diamonds, and precious gems, which are a very opulent form of wealth, which are a lot less troubling and less demanding to look after than 100 head of cattle. But in any case, it could well be that, as Rashid says later on famously, that Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven were prioritizing their money. But he advances another, so meaning that it's not so much that they had more livestock, perhaps they did a little bit more, but they valued it more greatly. They were more motivated and more concerned with their prosperity relative to the other Shvatim. He makes another suggestion as well, though, which I think is probably, well, equally plausible, and it's a little bit more benign, and that is that they had a knack for animal husbandry. You know, it's like someone who has an interest or a talent for a certain endeavor. Let's say someone is a very capable mechanic. So maybe he acquires or inherits 5 cars. Maybe there's 50 cars in the estate, and 10 brothers inherit 5 cars each. So a person who's not a mechanic thinks, well, what do I need 5 cars for? You know, 1 car is enough. The one who's a mechanic, he thinks, you know what? These are great cars. I can fix them up. I can improve them. I can polish them. I can sell them for a lot of money. So they all have the same number of cars, but some people it doesn't interest them, and others it does, because that's a natural talent. I mean, I was going to give an example of baseball cards. When I was young, I see my sister Shira is here. So when I was young, I used to love baseball cards. I had a baseball card collection. Now, if someone else had that collection, like Shira had that collection, it would have meant very little to her. But for me, a baseball card collection was fascinating. I had a lot of interest in it. So in a similar way, Abarbanel suggests it could be. It's not so much that they had more mikneh than the others. It just means that they appreciated it more. Could be because they were more materialistic, but it could be not because they were more materialistic. They just had more of a talent, more of a knack, more of an understanding. That was their area of maybe a financial endeavor, and that was what they did well. And therefore, for them, the fact that they were in an area with great pasture land, it was very important to them. Okay, so far, so technical, and just in terms of explaining why this passage is here rather than earlier. And the answer is suggesting, Abravanel suggests, is that they acquired all of this cattle as a result of the war with Midian. And now they realize, because we're so laden with livestock, we'd like to stay here. Of course, as we know, Moshe is not very impressed with their suggestion. And he criticizes them, although eventually he does relent. Question is, what was their thinking regarding their preparedness to settle in the east bank of the Jordan? The promised land has been foretold for generations. They are well aware that the land of Canaan was promised to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They were well aware that they were en route, albeit long delayed, to a land flowing with milk and honey. Why did they decide that they want to stay in the east bank of the Jordan? Okay, so superficially, the answer is that because they've got livestock, that's a place for livestock. But Abravanel explains further that Gad, the tribe of Gad, were very fierce warriors. Taraf Zeroa Afkadkad, that the warriors, Rashi says that the enemies that were routed by the people of Gad were evident from the way that they were killed, without getting too grisly about it. They were fierce warriors, Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven. Gad Gedud Yigudenu V'Yagud Aked. That God was a formidable military force, and therefore they had the confidence to stay in Ever HaYarden. Of course, their motivation was because of the pasture land, but were they not afraid to be isolated in the east bank of the Jordan? The answer is no, they were not afraid, because they had that self-confidence. They had that power, and they felt that we have no need to seek shelter in numbers. The rest of the tribes of Israel, they wanted to share the company of their brethren in the land of Israel for protection. God said, I don't need any special protection. I can protect myself. I'm a fierce warrior. So that's what he says, which again is not necessarily so much to their credit. Because it's not about power and about military prowess. It's about the love of the land of Israel and the achdus with the Jewish people, with the rest of the nations. What about Reuven? So here he advances a very logical explanation, somewhat logical explanation, for why Reuven in particular wanted to stay Me'ever HaYarden. Again, the headline reason is all the cattle, all the livestock. The weakness with that is that what's the basis? How did it come about that they had more livestock than anybody else? So we suggested maybe how it came about, maybe they had great interest in it. Abarbanel adds something else though. Reuven was the firstborn. Reuven was Kochi Bereshis Oni. Reuven would have naturally had the rights of the firstborn. He would have had a double portion, which goes to the firstborn. He would have been the natural leader, which is the role of the firstborn. Actually, as Targum Onkelos says in Parshas Vayechi, we're getting to Menashe. As he says in as Rashi says in Parashas Vayechi, Onkelos and Vayechi, Reuven would have had a third like reward for being the firstborn as well. So one is the double portion, the second is the leadership role, and the third is he would have been the ecclesiastical authorities as well. He would have been the Torah teacher, he would have been the rabbinic tribe also, and that was given to Levi. So says Abarbanel, Reuven felt very aggrieved. He felt aggrieved that his priority, his prestigious position had been usurped. And even if he doesn't blame Yehuda, Yosef, Yehuda, and Levi, because ultimately it was Hashem or even Yaakov who said Pachas Kamaim al Tosar, etc. But the fact is, he doesn't want to be subordinate to those who are younger than him. Again, Reuven is the eldest. Reuven was the eldest of the sons of Yaakov. Therefore, the tribe of Reuven felt we're the firstborn. But even though we're the firstborn, Yehuda is the leader. Yosef has two tribes. Levi are the religious leadership, and we've got nothing. We've got nothing special. We don't want to be humiliated by being in the company of our brothers who are younger and superior. Who needs that? I'm out of here. Reuven said, therefore, I would rather hang out on my own. I'd rather go my own way. I'd rather be in Ever HaYarden, and at least then I don't have the sensation of being subordinate to my younger brothers. So that's what Abravanel suggests. Again, it's not so much complimentary to Reuven, but we can at least understand the logic of it, why he was reluctant to just occupy a tract of land in Eretz Israel, together with all the other tribes, including the tribes of that are the sons of the maidservants. He doesn't want to be in that subordinate role. Then he adds on that Gad and Reuven got together on this because Reuven was the head of the Degel. Although he wasn't the first Degel, that was Yehuda, but Reuven was the head of the next wing of the camp when they traveled. Gad was one of his companions. Also, Gad was the son of the maidservant of the mother of Reuven. Reuven's mother was Leah. Leah's maidservant was Zilpah, and Gad was the son of Zilpah. So they had a natural affinity, and probably Gad would have felt as if his brother Reuven is like his protector or his companion, and the way that Reuven goes, God says, I'm going to go as well. So those are the explanations as to why those two tribes decided to remain in the east bank of the Jordan. Now, Shira was just sent me a little message. My sister Shira, elder sister Shira, that tribe of Manasseh, half the tribe of Manasseh was there as well. So just very briefly, actually, Abravanel doesn't go so much into the Manasseh part. Although we say Chatzi Shevet Manasseh, they never even asked to be there. Reuven and Gad asked to be there. First, Moshe didn't like the idea. Then he warmed to the idea, or at least he acquiesced. Um, uh, Manasseh never even asked to be there. But Moshe instructed half of the tribe of Manasseh. Now, it wasn't actually half the tribe, it was like a quarter of the tribe. Because Manasseh had uh, eight sons, of which two of the sub-tribes of Manasseh were allocated for the east bank of the Jordan. So the Meforshim say that Reuven and Gad, their attachment to the land of Israel evidently was not as intense or as warm or as passionate as it could have been. And the proof of that is that they were willing and even desirous of remaining in the Transjordan, the east bank of the Yarden. Manasseh distinguished himself for his love of the land of Israel. Firstly, Manasseh is the son of Yosef, and Yosef is the one who said, Ganov Gunav Timeretz Havrim, that Yosef identified with the land of Israel. And that's why he was Nikbar in Eretz Israel as well. Even though we have a tradition that all of the sons of Yaakov were transported there, but the Torah doesn't tell us that. The Torah just says about Yosef, that Yosef, Moshe himself, brought his remains to the edge of Eretz Israel, and Yosef Nikbar Ba'aretz. Moreover, it was from the daughters of the tribe of Menashe, the daughters of Tzlafcha, that we see again the extreme desire and devotion to the land of Israel. So Menashe had great love of the land of Israel. So why does Moshe say to half of them or a quarter of them, you live in Evar Yarden? The answer is that was exactly the point. In order to keep Gad and Reuven close, Manasseh was the bridge because part of the tribe of Manasseh is in the land of Israel. Another part of the tribe of Manasseh is in Eva HaYarden. So that solidarity within the tribe of Manasseh also serves as a bridge for Reuven and Gad as well. I mean, it didn't work so brilliantly because ultimately they were exiled first. But nevertheless, we do find that strategy, let's say, that Moshe employed according to the Mefarshim. In the short minutes we have left, I want to share with you what Abarbanel says about a parsha in the Torah. Appears in our Sedra. It appears briefly elsewhere as well, and it's fascinating to consider why the Torah or some of the details about that parsha. I'm talking about the person who is guilty of manslaughter. Manslaughter is a form of a crime which is not premeditated murder. It's death of another person, homicide through negligence, through carelessness, through thoughtlessness, through callousness, but it's not premeditated. Okay, that's what we call manslaughter. That's called horeg nefesh b'shgaga. The Torah describes in a lot of detail, again, the Arei Miklat, which Moshe established. I want to just focus, again, in the short time we have left, on the question of why it is that the one who is guilty of manslaughter, who takes refuge in the city of refuge, and by to the extent that he remains there, he is protected from the vengeance of the Goel Hadam. So I want to consider, why does the Torah say that he has to remain there, or he's advised to remain there, otherwise he's liable to the vengeance, he's susceptible to the vengeance of the Goel Hadam until the Kohen Gadol dies. Once the Kohen Gadol dies, it's get out of jail free. Everybody can go home. All of those uh, refugees in the Ir Miklat, they can go home once the Kohen Gadol dies. What's the relationship between those two phenomena? So Abarbanel says the following. The Kohen Gadol represents the greatest of the nation. He's like the Tzaddik Hador. He's the greatest. He's the most righteous. He's venerated. He's admired. He's beloved. He's respected. He bears on his in the breastplate the Choshen Mishpat, the Urim V'Tumim, which is a medium of divine prophecy. So the Kohen Gadol, certainly in Bais Rishon, is almost in the level of a prophet. Some of them probably were prophets, actually, but even those who were not prophets explicitly, but they carried the medium of prophecy. So we're talking about the greatest of the generation. And when such a person dies, and also the Kohanim, particularly the Kohen Gadol, are supposed to stay far from death. So when death comes calling, even for the Kohen Gadol, says Abarbanel, "V'hachai yitain el libo," the living should contemplate the evanescence of life. Life is too short to bear an eternal grudge. So the Goel Hadam, who's looking for an opportunity to avenge the death of his next of kin, but when the Kohen Gadol dies, it should have the effect of reminding him the frailty of life, the evanescence of life, how even the greatest person ultimately succumbs to death, whether before his time or at his time. Mi bekitzo, mi lo bekitzo. Says Abarbanel, he should contemplate that before long, machar, tomorrow, they're going to take him to the graveyard as well, the avenger of blood. In other words, he'll say, you know what? Life is too short for grudges. It's time to bury the hatchet. It's time to just put uh lay to rest the anger, the fury, the desire for vengeance, etc. And therefore, that's why when the Kohen Gadol dies, that prompts it should prompt all of those Go'alei Hadam to put aside their vengeance, and therefore, at that point, the manslaughterer can go for it. I just want to add a little postscript. I heard many years ago in the name of Rabbi Emanuel Feldman. Rabbi Emanuel Feldman lives in Beit Vegan. He's retired now many years. I think he's well into his 90s. Was the rabbi in Atlanta, Georgia for many years. And he was a rabbi's rabbi in many ways. He related once how he was teaching rabbis, prospective rabbis or young rabbis, and he said that I see Ruthie likes my pun about burying the hatchet, yeah, because it says that the incident of the inadvertent death is when a person goes into the forest to chop wood. The Rabbi Feldman said that sometimes lo aleinu lo aleichem, when an rabbi is required to speak at a funeral or to comfort the bereaved and to effectively seek to um, bring consolation and succor and halachic fidelity to those, lo aleinu, who have suffered a bereavement. It's also an opportunity for religious inspiration. It's an opportunity when the rabbi perhaps can have an influence in a way or in a manner that he could not under other circumstances, because maybe the relationship of that person or that family to the rabbi is not so close and they're not such religiously devout people. But when the angel of death comes around, people get respectful. And he related, I mean, it's a bit humorous, it's a bit of gallows humor, dark humor. He said that he was speaking to a family. He didn't really know them well, but I guess they were members of his congregation, or perhaps the deceased was a member of the congregation. And he said, "What can you tell me about your father, or grandfather, perhaps was?" Anyway, so they said a little because the rabbi wanted to be able to say something appropriate at the funeral. And he said, are there any other family members? So they said, yeah, we've got cousins or brothers, something like that, but we don't speak to them. We fell out many years ago. So the rabbi, in all, not just innocence, but in all, you know, desire to take the opportunity to, uh, like, bring about a reconciliation, he said, we're here faced with the even essence of life itself. Perhaps this is the time to reconcile. So he said, "What was the dispute about?" And here's the punchline of it. They thought for a little while and they said, "You know what? It happened so long ago. The quarrel and the bad blood is so long-standing. We don't even remember what we were quarreling about. I can't even remember what it was about. All I know is you don't speak to them." And that is the sadness, that sometimes hostility and animosity and antagonism, and dare I say hatred, can take on a malevolent life of its own, so that they even forgot what they were arguing about. All they know is they're arguing. So, in a similar way, the death of the Kohen Gadol should prompt all concerned to reflect on how life is too short for eternal grudges, and at this point, the Goel Hadam can go home. I'm sorry, um, the manslaughter can go home. The Goel Hadam will put aside his vengeance, and they'll be able to move on with their lives. Okay, thank you very much. We've gone over a few minutes, but we covered quite a lot in a very long Sedra as well. So thank you to everyone for listening. Next week, B'ezrat Hashem, will be the last of the season because the following Thursday is Tisha B'Av, and then we'll be in recess for a little while. So B'ezrat Hashem, we'll be back at it next Thursday. We'll do Parshas Dvarim, and we look forward to seeing you then.